Welcome to one of the longest running conversation programs in American broadcasting. It's Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're alongside. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. I'm joined by a distinguished panel, Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College, Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. We begin today with the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history. Last week, customers withdrew $42 billion from Silicon Valley Bank. The bank run raised questions about the fragility of financial institutions in a digital environment. President Biden said, "Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. We'll do whatever it takes and whatever is needed." Panelists, were you surprised to hear the news of a bank run?
I was saddened, but I wasn't surprised, particularly in this day and age with the online services and the online information. Also, I guess the one thing that really bothered me was more with Signature Bank than with Silicon Valley Bank. A bank that was dealing in Bitcoins? I mean, that's pretty terrifying.
I think Signature also had some problem with cryptocurrency as well, I believe.
That's what I mean, the cryptocurrency. Yeah, it just, come on. I hope that my bank doesn't deal in things that are so obscure, strange, and, well, I'll say it. To me, they're a little bit nutty. They don't make sense.
Well, I think, of course, we had the great bank scare of 2008, and I think that always kind of puts a little cloud on all of it. And then, of course, some of the corrections and some of the helps to make sure that didn't happen again was changed a couple of years ago by the federal government, which opened the door to some of, as you said, Stan, some more speculation of some banks. But I think it's a serious issue because I guess there's now a bank in Europe that also failed recently and about a whole different issue. So I think that does get everybody nervous. And when people can move their money around so easily these days, that gets scary as well.
Well, and I guess one other aspect of this particular situation that poured fuel onto this fire, in addition to the fact that money can be withdrawn so quickly in this digital age in which we find ourselves, is that the Silicon Valley Bank, the name was foreshadowing in some respects for what unfolded. Not only were these many of the investors, according to reports, social media savvy, let's say, including many tech companies, social media companies, etc. A lot of them were geographically confined to Northern California or in the tech world. So it made the world even smaller, is my point. There was not a great deal of diversification for this relatively small bank. When I hear that a bank had over $200 billion worth of holdings and assets, that sounds like a substantial amount of money. But when you step back and you compare that to what other banks are sitting on, it is relatively small. But then when you have a group of depositors that are so closely aligned in their thinking, when a run does happen in a digital age, when you have people that are connected in other ways, it exacerbates the speed at which things can take place. And so some of the larger banks or banks that are more diversified in terms of those that are making those depositors hopefully the fact that there is more diversification in that regard will make a difference moving ahead and be a safeguard and stopgap. But nonetheless, it still does raise the question that many are chewing on right now regarding how quickly a run can occur in a digital age. And then one other thing that I'd mention is that a lot of this comes down to psychology, right? And how quickly one's perspective, psychologically speaking, can be altered. Most banks do not have the money on hand today. If we were to go to our banks and all of us, all of the depositors were to withdraw what is owed us, every bank would fail that I know of. So the psychological element of our banking system has to just be taken into consideration. It's a collective psychological figment of our imagination that we engage in to make this system work.
Well, I think that what was mentioned, Jason, by you earlier about diversification is the big piece of this entire thing. And that is that regardless of the size of the bank, whether it's a large bank, small company, large company, large or small church, that if we're putting all of our eggs in two baskets and thinking that nothing about the economy will shift and change, this is what happens. And this is not only just within banking, but this is in every area of investments. They put a large stock on low interest bearing mortgage based bonds and treasury notes. And then the Fed started raising the rates to try to keep and hedge off inflation. And that just put them in a precarious position because they had nothing else within their portfolio to balance off losses. I mean, it's basic to me that, when you're putting a big load of your assets into only one type of investment or a couple of, and there's not, like Jason mentioned, wider diversification of varying risks. It puts them in a precarious situation. I think it's a lesson for all of us who are leading organizations, especially church organizations with investment strategies of any kind, especially those our parishioners within our various different faith traditions that have investments, that have retirement funds that they're depending on to retire, that there needs to be a look. We have to continue to look again at how, as much as we can know and as much as we can learn, how these funds are invested, and to diversify as much as possible to do the best that you can to ameliorate the various different ups and downs and variations that just happens within the market.
So I think this reminds me of the Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life, when there was a run on the Bailey Building and Loan. And he said, well, Joe, your money's not here. It's building Stan's house and Jason's business. So are you concerned? I know Twitter had a lot to do with the social media and messages across that. Are you concerned about your own bank or other banks that may seem larger and said, oh, they're unstoppable, untouchable?
I'm concerned about what's happening in general, that being a part of it. After the 2008 debacle, there were laws passed by Congress to make sure that never happened again. Many of those laws no longer exist because the previous administration overturned them. That's scary. And so I think that those laws to protect banks and depositors should be reinstated as quickly as possible and not in jeopardy to be overturned once again at the whim of another administration.
I think as we're talking about the administration, I thought the present administration did a quick job over the weekend. Obviously, none of them got to go home and kick up their shoes and relax because of this crisis. But it sounds like, at least for the time being, they've stabilized the banking situation. So they're guaranteeing things. That's a big help. But again, it's one of those challenges we have where some people say, oh, the government's too big. We need to limit government. And yet we need to be protected. We want the government to protect our food, our meat, our other things. We want them to protect our banks. There is a role for government, and whether on a local or a national level, and those who want to gut the government at any level are crazy in terms of protections of all kinds of things, whether it's our educational system or so many other systems that we need to be protected from those who make poor decisions.
Joe, you stole my thunder, but I do want to pick up that ball that you started running with regarding the government. I mean, it's easy to bemoan and belittle and complain about the government until your house is on fire, and you need the fire department to come. It's easy to moan and groan about the government until the trash starts piling up, and you need your municipal tax supported garbage collection fellas to come around and pick up your trash. Similar
or your
situation.
Water gets polluted.
Your water gets polluted, your food gets unsafe. It goes on and on and on. And I do think that mindset, which has seeped, I think, into common parlance and discourse when it comes to our relationship with the government, it has exceeded bounds of reasonableness. The example I see driving around our community, the state of Kentucky, I'll see a lot of flags or bumper stickers that say, "Don't tread on me," which is kind of a motto, a phrase that's been adapted by libertarians and those that advance small government. And I always chuckle as they're driving down a federally funded interstate. And I think to myself, don't tread on me. You are literally, your tire treads I'm paying for the road. The treads of your tires are going down. And so that just makes me chuckle. And this is just another illustration. I mean, the FDIC deposits ensured that folks would receive $250,000 back. That's what I'd get at my bank. That's what you'd get. But obviously, a lot of folks, especially small businesses, tech startups, venture capitalists, they have a lot more than $250,000 in the bank. And so what does the federal government do? They step in over the weekend, Joe, as you alluded to, and they said, those depositors that had more than $250,000, you're going to get your money back. That's a perfect example of the way in which government stepped in over the weekend to ensure that this did not then become a domino effect whereby other entities, other banks began to fall. So yes, I mean, could government be better? Is red tape a headache? Absolutely. We all can agree on that. But at the same time, to throw the baby out with the bathwater in that line of thinking does not make any sense. We have to collectively come together, and the government's the vehicle through which we do that.
But theologically, we know that greed is a part of the human condition, and it surfaces and manifests in various different ways. And so those that want to deregulate and just sing the song and verse of deregulation continuously from a mistaken notion that regulation hampers progress, it hampers freedom, it hampers liberty. No, it holds the human condition in the right types of responsible boundaries that keeps persons from taking advantage of other people, from our own self-harm, for harming other people, particularly when it comes to financial harm, which does not tend to get the same type of level of criminal jurisprudence as other types of crimes. And so definitely we need to have government, which is the only entity that can do it in any type of way that would be representative to protect the citizens of this nation. We need more regulation, not less regulation, to ensure that people are safe to be as free as we can. freedom without boundaries is anarchy. It is no freedom at all. And so it is important that we remember those who want to knock on your door and get your vote, but are singing the song of a demonic hymn of deregulation.
All right, panel, we're about halfway through our program, Moral Side of the News, and we'll continue on with some more about the Biden administration. Approved a $8 billion oil drilling project in Alaska this week. It's a significant change for the administration that had pledged to move away from fossil fuels. The Interior Department gave formal approval for the ConocoPhillips Willow project, which expects to produce 180,000 barrels of oil per day. Turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, how do you weigh in on this?
I think the concern, of course, of probably all of us here on the panel is climate change, the whole environment and care of the environment. And those questions are more serious now than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and seem like they're going to be even more critical in another 5 or 10 years. So it's disappointing on one sense that we're backing off of this. But as we know, politics is always compromise. He's tried to compromise something because people still need gasoline and oil, because we're not completely moved to electric cars yet, and we're not totally developed about all that. So I understand the need sometimes to compromise, but in the critical situation that we're in, it really concerns me that how long do we do that? To say, okay, we've got to do this for a limited period of time, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I don't think it's a long-term solution at all to what is an critical problem.
It also seemed like it was a much more scaled down project than the initial project.
Three sites instead of 5.
Right. Getting back to the first issue and the Biden administration, I was pleased by what the president did, but I wasn't surprised. But I didn't expect to be surprised either. This is just the way that this president operates, and I just say thank God.
On the banking situation you're talking about.
Yes.
Well, we know that the people in Alaska are celebrating. Those persons who are going to be making livelihoods from what is developed are celebrating. I share the concerns definitely about climate change, and we're not doing enough, and this certainly doesn't add to it. Much less development of drilling that we don't think will have some negative impact, disastrous impact on the climate around when the next leak happens, or when the pipe is burst, or something that happens that goes awry, and then we're bemoaning the killing of animals and plants and whatever the space is there. But I also deeply appreciate the cusp that we're in. We're in a cusp of development of new alternative energy that's going to take some time to develop. At the same time, we're trying to wean off our dependence on Saudi oil and other types of foreign energy inputs that puts us in a very precarious situation. So I definitely agree with Joe, that I can see both sides. I tend to really have significant concerns about climate change, and the younger generations who are going to be the largest voting bloc in just a few years. This is a significant issue for them. It's everything, because it seems as if decisions like this mortgages their future away, and there's going to be some political price to pay. I certainly believe that in the next few years.
How much the more so that this is happening in Alaska? the glaciers that existed 3, 4, 5 years ago are just memories. So the ecology in that state, more than I think any place else in our country, is under a cataclysmic change.
But I was just going to jump off of what Kilen was mentioning about younger voters. If I'm not mistaken, I saw just this week that by the year 2025, the largest voting bloc in the country will be people under 30. And that is a dramatic shift in terms of the voting demographics that is not in the distant future at this point. It is here. And Kilen, I think you're correct to identify that this issue in particular is one that will be looked at differently. I just wanted to point out relative to the first issue, the banking issue that we looked at, this is a perfect example of government regulations at work. The reason that this project was delayed was due to the fact that in order to proceed with the Willow project, an environmental impact study had to be submitted to the EPA, to the Environmental Protection Agency. And the EPA had concerns about the environmental impact that would occur. A new proposal was put forth. If I'm not mistaken, 16 million acres in Alaska will now be set aside on the other side of this project where drilling cannot happen. A reduction, as we mentioned, from 5 sites to 3. Just so you know, that's the government trying to strike the balance. We understand that there's constantly this tension and this tug of war between energy that we need to heat our homes, to drive our cars, to cool our homes as we're moving into spring and summer, and protecting future generations. We understand that there needs to be liberty and freedom to function in financial markets, but it has to be constrained within limits. This is an example of how there are processes that are set up to do just that. So I just wanted to point out that this is how it works. That balance between we need energy weaning off of Saudi energy, and at the same time, keeping in mind the importance of protecting the environment now and for future generations. This is a product of that.
Well, I have a personal care about the people who will be living close to that place. I grew up in Memphis, in South Memphis, and right in our backyard was the Delta Oil Refinery. And going out of our neighborhoods at midnight was dangerous. Every now and then the water that we drank was dangerous. In the midst of assurances from government that things would not be impacting us, I'm still not quite sure of what type of health issues I'm still going to be discovering later on. So yes, in the midst of the need for regulation, these types of projects don't have a good, clean record of ensuring that those that are developing the energy that we have are caring for the places that they reside. We just seen what happened in Ohio at East Palestine about trains that are going through with chemicals and an explosion happens. So I really am praying for whatever communities and neighborhoods while Alaska celebrates. I'm really concerned about the people who will be living with the development and what happens with that energy that's developed in that area.
I think Jason, too, I think it's 68,000 acres to create a buffer zone between the Willow site and the migration routes for caribou. So it's 68,000, which is significant, but I think all the concerns are still there long term. Excuse me, Stan.
You talk about that and the trains. I have a new view when I'm stopped by a train at Frankfurt Avenue. I wonder what's in it.
Yeah.
So.
All right, panel, we'll come to another topic as we wind up this edition of Moral Side of the News. About 3 minutes left. He's back and looking better than ever. A giant banner of beloved former University of Louisville men's basketball coach Denny Crum keeps watch on the home of the Cardinals across the street from the KFC Yum Center. Panel, it's an honor for Coach Crum. Is there anyone else you hope to see deemed banner worthy? Anyone come to mind? Maybe one of you. I don't know.
Not a chance.
Not a
Well,
chance.
maybe the rest
Absolutely.
of it, not me.
Well, I think
good, Joe.
I think it's particularly good for Denny Crum, who served this community for 30 years and is obviously not doing in the best health and well up in years. I'm glad we're finally putting one back, and that's a good spot for it right by the Yum Center. So I love those banners in lots of ways, and the different people in the community, they stopped it for a while, but now they're bringing them back. I think that's a great idea to lift up our hometown heroes.
It's a great counterpoint to the Denny Crum floor for basketball at the Yum Center. And it also, it's good in that when he retired, and the word retired is in quotes there, folks, he was not treated well. He was really treated rather shabbily. But nevertheless, he still stuck with U of L. And that shows a great deal of character on the part of Coach Crum.
One name that comes to my mind that I believe will be recognized as a part of unveilings later this year that I think is long overdue is Wes Unseld. A hometown, speaking of basketball, March Madness, Denny Crum. I grew up in the 80s. The 1986 national championship team is the team that made me fall in love with the University of Louisville Cardinal basketball program and basketball in general, to be honest with you. But Wes Unseld, a product, homegrown product here of Louisville, holds and has held so many records at the University of Louisville, scoring, rebounding. I'm pretty sure he still holds the rebounding record at U of L. And then went on to probably the best national or professional career in basketball of any player that's come out of the University of Louisville. So that one's overdue. I believe it's coming in 2023, and that's a very good thing.
That was the name I was going to mention, Wes Unseld. It has to be. That has to happen. So I'm glad to hear that they're doing something later in the year.
I'm also remembering Felton Spencer, who died this past week. I had met him several times in the 80s. He was a member of my parish at one time with his mom and sister. And so what a great loss. A really classy guy, too.
We have
and
to... Sorry.
Don't forget about what Wes Unseld did for Seneca High School.
We have to wrap up this edition, Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel, to Jason Crosby, Kilen Gray, Stan Miles, and Joe Graffis. You can catch this program again on YouTube. And all new conversations are on next week here at Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel. In just a few months, we'll celebrate the 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children. And there's something special. You could win a kitchen full of GE appliances. Just go to WHAScrusade.org and purchase a raffle ticket to win a kitchen full of GE appliances.